Lecture 10. Higher Occult or Spiritual Forces and Their Uses. There is an old saying that birds of a feather flock together, which is another way of saying, tell me who a man's friends are, and I will tell you what manner of man he is. Through both these maxims, the same thought runs that like mentalities are found in groups. There are certain groupings of forces and of truths. There are also a grouping of minds. Literary people are likely to be drawn together. Musicians naturally seek musicians for their friends. And this is due to the fact that the individuals who compose these groups vibrate in the same common key. They think along the same general lines. They have what is sometimes called sympathetic vibration. That is, they vibrate at the same general rate. In physics, we see evidence of sympathetic vibrations. If you strike a note on the piano, you will frequently hear a part of a chandelier or a wine glass on the sideboard vibrate in sympathy with that particular note. This shows that the mass tone of the glass is identical with that of the note upon the piano. In thought, there is sympathetic vibration also, and for this reason, it is sometimes difficult to determine who is the real inventor of a thing. For example, who was the inventor of the telephone? If Bell, then why was it necessary to have all the controversy that occurred between him and those claiming it under Gray? Why was it necessary to have a lawsuit and then to compromise their claims? Bell, Gray, and Edison were thinking along the same lines, had become attached to a certain thought current and developed the same ideas simultaneously. We often hear the expression, I got into a certain current of thought. To the careless thinker, this expression means nothing in particular, but to the student of occultism, it means a great deal more than a mere form of expression, for there are currents of thought in the great magnetic sea of consciousness in which we live, and we can and do attach ourselves, either consciously or unconsciously, to different currents with definite results. Picture to yourself for a moment this magnetic consciousness of which we are a part. It is pulsating with life, and is capable of receiving and transmitting thought. In this great magnetic sea, there are thought currents as clearly defined as there are currents in the air or in the ocean. You know there is a current in the ocean which is called the Antarctic Drift, and another called the Gulf Stream, etc. In universal mind, there are currents of thought which are distinctly separate as there are these two currents in the ocean. And it is as necessary that we should know about the one as that we should know about the other, because a man draws from the currents in universal mind such thoughts or ideas as he is sympathetically vibrating with. When you and I are thinking along the same general lines, we are in a current of thought, which is one of those in the universal consciousness. And because your mind and mine are attached to this current, we are for the time being receiving in unison the same general ideas. Plagiarism may be often explained in this manner. Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote the poem, Man Wants But Little Here Below, and after it was published, a friend called his attention to the fact that Adams had written not only in the same theme, but had used the same similes and many of the same expressions many years before. Yet no one would think of calling Dr. Holmes a plagiarist. By thinking along the line, his mind had become attached to the same current or thought that Adams had been when he expressed himself in a similar manner. Inventors often get into the same current of thought and work along similar lines, and then suddenly startle the public with inventions of a like nature. Each inventor declares himself the sole discoverer of the thing invented. During the last 2 decades or more, there has been no great discovery made in physics that can be attributed to the mind of any one man, since several minds have contributed towards each and all the discoveries that have been made. Man draws from the universal according to his mentality, and groups of men may draw simultaneously the same ideas from the same currents of thought. These currents of thought are used by men unconsciously, semi-consciously, and consciously. For example, a man desires to possess great wealth, and decides he will have it. He knows nothing about the scientific use of mind, but puts certain laws into operation through his desire and decision to gain wealth. If he persists, wealth must come to him because he has set the law into operation which will bring it. But it may be a long time coming because he does not understand how to use his mind scientifically to hasten it. Another man who has studied along the line of mental science and who knows there is power in the individual mind to demand from the universal mind says, "Give me wealth." He persists in making his demands frequently and earnestly, and in time the wealth will come to him. He has used the law semi-consciously and will obtain what he demands more quickly than the first man. The occultist knows that by making a mental image of wealth, and by concentrating his thoughts upon it, he has put into operation a law, and that through the magnetic cord which connects him with his creation, he will draw to himself the wealth he has created. He uses the law consciously, and therefore realizes his desires much sooner than the other two. To live is to use these currents of force either consciously or unconsciously, but men always attribute their successes to external causes until they learn something about the laws which govern success. At this time, many persons are using these cosmic currents of force for the therapeutical purposes and are performing cures of bodily ills through mental processes. Each claims to cure through a system of healing different from the others. As witness Christian scientists, mental scientists, new thought scientists, faith curer, divine healer, the priest of the water of the spring of Lourdes, magnetic healer, hypnosis, etc., it makes no difference what the claims of these respective schools may be. The phenomena of healing must be based on the same law. Jesus knew the nature and use of these cosmic forces and taught them to his disciples, who produced the phenomena called miracles through the use of them. Apollonius of Tyana and his disciples performed miracles and cures in the same manner. And before these, the Essenes, Pythagoreans, Buddhists, and Brahmins used these currents of force for the same purposes. And during the early Christian centuries and Middle Ages, the Neoplatonists, mystics, and Rosicrucians used them in their work with mankind. These currents are spiritual forces and are a part of the universal spirit or mind. Spiritual force may be defined as motion generated by divine mind in contradistinction to motion generated by individual mind or by mechanical processes. You remember the all-important fact so often reiterated in this course of lectures that the sensitive ether mind of the universe is all around us. As air surrounds man, or as the ocean surrounds and sustains the fish which live in it. Like the ocean, divine mind is always in motion. The ocean has its inherent motion due to the tides, and also its superficial or wave motion due to external causes such as wind, etc. Divine mind has its motion per se, which are the currents within it, and these currents are superficially modified by the thoughts of men. An individual mind cannot permanently work against the universal current, nor misuse it any more than it can keep the tide in the Bay of Fundy from rising. But it can work along the right lines and make use of these great currents to its own advantage, and in this manner work with nature instead of against it. While it is true that force is one, yet force manifests on this planet under different aspects, and we will consider 5 of these as 5 forces, or 5 great currents. Remember, all force is one force, but manifests at different rates of vibration according to the media through which it acts. And these different rates of vibration we will call, for convenience sake, separate currents. Each of these 5 currents is subdivided into other currents, and each of these subdivisions, like the great currents, is separated from each other by a difference in their rate of vibration. The same as the Gulf Stream separated from the main body of water through which it flows by a difference in the rate of vibration. These cosmic currents vibrate red, orange, green, blue, and yellow, and may be pictured as vibratory currents of color. To illustrate them crudely, we may compare them with physical things with which we are familiar. The rainbow, for example. Imagine a great rainbow encircling the earth, and suppose it to be in motion, and you will have an idea of how these currents look as they encircle this planet, with each force representing one of the colors of the rainbow. Only instead of the alleged 7 colors of the rainbow, you will have 5 distinct colors. It is true that the real currents have been partly or dimly seen by men, and are called the zodiacal lights. And the many-colored northern lights also give us glimpses of portions of these currents, which sweep round and permeate the earth and every part of it. The cosmic currents sweep not only over the surface of the ground, but through it, passing down on one side of the globe and up on the other side. They also sweep down and through one side of man and up on the other side. For man is but a small world, and so he and every portion of the world is touched by all these currents. Looking at them from the subjective side of life, they appear as if a great number of ribbons of the 5 different colors were being waved up and down and wound around and around the earth, as if all men and living creatures were being entangled in them. Doubtless you have looked out over the hot pavements of a city in the month of August, and have seen the heat vibrations rising from them in wavering clouds. Imagine those grayish-white heat vibrations to be of 5 different colors, and you will have a very good picture of how the cosmic forces look. Suppose my hand were full of ribbon streamers of these different colors, and I should shake them rapidly and before your eyes. Some of you, being partially colorblind, would see only the red and green ribbons. Others might see those 2 colors and the blue, while some would see the yellow and orange and the other 3. Each person would see according to his capacity for seeing, and it is the same with your ability to see and use the cosmic forces. You see and function in the color with which you are connected by reason of your corresponding vibrations. The human mind is related to these currents very much as a telegraph instrument is related to the telegraph wires. It may be attached to any wire and repeat all messages that pass over it. The human mind can attach itself to the blue, the red, the yellow, or the green current, as the case may be, and receive everything in that current. And it is through its power to tap the different currents that it is able to draw anything that it may desire from those currents. You may ask, how can there be a cosmic current that we cannot see or feel? I must call your attention to the fact that because you do not feel or see a force is no reason that it does not exist. You cannot see free electricity, and certain conditions must exist before you can see or feel it. Yet you do not deny that it is a force, and many of you are learning to use it. You do not feel the cosmic currents because the necessary conditions have not been made to make you feel them. If you were shut in a room where you could not feel the wind and it blew very hard outside, the conditions would not be right for you to feel it. And since it is a force which cannot be seen, you would not know that it existed. The first thing to do to become conscious of these color currents is to image or visualize them, and remember that nothing was ever imagined by mind that does not exist in the universe. If you are vibrating green, and the blue has begun to tinge your aura, then visualize the blue, and it will be drawn into you. Since whatever you concentrate upon or image, you must draw to yourself. If you have developed to the point of the blue vibration tinged with the yellow, then you can draw the yellow cosmic current into yourself. And whenever you are able to draw to you a current that is vibrating higher than your predominating color, you raise your own vibrations and receive all the good that you are capable of assimilating from that current. These mental pictures and concentration are the 2 instruments we utilize for the purpose of connecting ourselves with cosmic currents, which are constantly flowing around the earth. It is difficult for you to image or visualize the color you desire. If it is, then secure a bit of ribbon of the proper shade or a drapery of the color you want, and look at it until you have the color impressed upon your mind. This will help you to visualize the cosmic currents, and when you are concentrating, you should realize that they are currents of force, though you speak of them in terms of color. When the blue current is mentioned, that force is meant, which vibrates at a rate that makes it appear as blue. Electricity is a part of this current, and when the proper mechanism is used to condense and conduct it, it manifests as blue to the physical eyes. Commencing with the red current, we will study that first, because it is the lowest in the scale. Red vibrations in anything mean emotion of some sort. In man, it indicates that his animal nature is in the ascendancy. In animals, it is a perfectly natural vibration, but can be stimulated by external suggestions to an ungovernable or furious extent. For example, the bull or turkey are often driven into a frenzy of rage at a sight of a red flag. This is because the color red makes a picture in the mind of the creature, and by looking at that picture, its mind becomes connected with the universal current of red. Having tapped that force, it draws into itself all that it can assimilate of that rate of vibration and is angry. Man, like the animal, sometimes uses the red current unconsciously, and whenever he gets angry, he connects himself with it, whether conscious of it or not, and this is the reason he loses his self-control so quickly. As soon as he becomes enraged, his aura changes to the vibration red. Then his aura is vibrating sympathetically with the red cosmic current, and the connection between the two is instantly made. The red current has been tapped. The man's aura is the conducting instrument for that force, and immediately the man becomes filled with the vibration. Self-control is swept away, and he rages like a mad animal. He has connected himself with everybody in the world who is angry at the moment, and he is functioning in these vibrations. He is receiving telepathically all the ugly things that other people are thinking about, and he does things while in that condition which he had never before thought of doing. If he commits murder while in this angry condition, the legal fraternity call him emotionally insane, and he escapes capital punishment by being incarcerated in an asylum for a while. Red is a low, disruptive, jagged vibration, and when it is drawn into a person, it begins its disruptive work upon the physical body of that person, and all the good creations which he has made are instantly repelled from his aura. And not only are good things and good people repelled from him, but he attracts all the so-called evil manifestations, and unless he recovers a mental poise and gets out of that red current, nothing but misfortune will come until he is swept out of his body. Anger demagnetizes the atoms which compose the physical body. There is a positive and negative side to every atom, as there is to every magnetic thing in the world. When we speak of a body having magnetic polarity, we mean that to the negative of one side stands the positive of the next, and to the negative of one atom stands the positive side of another atom. And when the body is demagnetized, this relationship is destroyed. The higher forces of nature flow rhythmically over these atoms when they are magnetically polarized, but when the red current, which is repellent, enters the body, it demagnetizes the atoms and prepares a condition for bacteria to enter and disease to follow. Sometimes the body becomes instantly disrupted by this demagnetizing force, and apoplexy is caused. Many times paralysis is produced because the red force is so great that the atoms which compose the nerves of the body become demagnetized and never afterwards regain their polarity. Different shades of the red compose the subcurrents of the great red current. The light shade, called scarlet, indicates anger. The darker shade, called crimson, indicates sex desire. Fear is indicated by a still darker shade, which is a red-brown, and which sometimes deepens to almost a brown-black. And the sense gratification is represented by a shade of wine color. The occultist uses this red current solely for the purpose of restoring the sex functions in a person who has become depleted and who desires to use his powers solely in a creative manner. The black magicians use the red current for the purpose of destruction, so that force can be utilized to destroy, and it can be used to these atoms when they are magnetically polarized, and it can be used to precipitate anything upon the material plane which floats or lives within it. In black magic, it is used for producing pests, plagues, and all kinds of diseases. The white magician can use it when the law requires or when mankind may be helped thereby, as Moses, the occultist, and the Egyptian magicians used it when Egypt was made to suffer for her sins. The orange current or force is used by everything that lives upon this earth. It is the life current and sustains every plant and animal body that exists. Every creature that breathes inhales it with the atmosphere, and things that do not have lung capacity absorb this great force through their bodies as sponges absorb water or moisture. If an animal becomes ill, it immediately goes out into the sunlight and breathes deeply of this orange force, and if permitted to remain in the sunshine, and all drugs, such as our sometimes unwise veterinary surgeons give to animals, are withheld, the creature will get well. The occultist uses this life force in treating animals, young children, and undeveloped persons who have not yet reached the point of their evolution where they vibrate green. He also uses it in stimulating the growth of plants. The Indian yogi puts a seed into the earth, and then condenses this orange force into it with such intensity that while you stand looking at him, the plant is forced out of the soil, comes to maturity, and bears fruit before your eyes. This wonderful feat is imitated by sleight-of-hand performers and by hypnotists who deceive people into believing they see it done. But there are men who can and do produce this phenomenon, and it is done by using the orange current in the manner I have described. Green is the current of individualization. It also represents selfishness, both in its higher and its lower forms. Manifesting in this great current is all desire for personal possessions, distinctions, and individual aggrandizement. It is the current of intellectualization without intuition. There are many people who have a great deal of book learning, whose objective minds are trained and who are intellectual, and their memory of facts and alleged facts is wonderful, but their subjective minds may be altogether undeveloped, and yet these persons pass for very wise individuals. They vibrate green and have but little or no real knowledge. For example, a lawyer may know thoroughly the laws of the state of New York, and may know exactly what decision has been given in a similar case to any proposition you may submit to him. But tomorrow, the legislature may meet and do away with all the old statutes, and pass a new set of laws, and the lawyer's knowledge would be legislated out of existence. There may be what we call intellectualization of a very high order, and yet it does not rise above the green current. Selfishness, in its lowest aspect, is in a subcurrent, and belongs in the shade called bottled green. The desire for personal possessions, for distinction, and for aggrandizement is the color of the grass we see in the autumn. In a very pronounced shade, but not so dark as the bottle green, intellectualization without intuition is still lighter shade, and a wise individualization without selfishness is the shade called pastel green. Individualization manifests as the green vibration everywhere in the universe, and when you look out into the heavens at night and see a star sending forth a green light, you may know that it, like our Earth, is passing through the period of individualization, and like our own world, is the fourth planet in a chain of 7. The planet of individualization is where men or minds become self-dependent, independent, self-reliant. The grass and foliage upon our earth is green because in the vegetable kingdom, universal consciousness is making an effort to individualize. The keynote of our world is Fa, which corresponds to the green color, and which produces it by its vibration. Animal souls are of this color at birth, but soon take the deeper color red when their bodies become strong enough to express desire for procreation. As man develops and becomes more and more individualized, he vibrates green in proportion to his development. The occultists use this color to create for himself and for others wealth, honor, position, and every material thing that can be desired. Suppose he desires to make a material creation. He would concentrate upon the green current until every part of his entire being was vibrating green, or until he had connected himself with this current. After making his connection, he would select the subcurrent he desired, and in that make the mental picture of the thing to be created. Suppose he wanted some money. He would know that the financial current, which is a part of the green current, was the one to use. After making his connection and the picture of the amount he wants, he will no longer think of the color current, but will put all his force in concentrating upon his creation, and the great consciousness will bring his creation to him out of this green current. The occultist gets quicker results than unconscious users of this law because he does not waste his force, but goes directly and scientifically to work. He knows what he wants and how to get it, and there is no uncertainty or indecision in his efforts, and as a consequence, no delay. In cases of nervousness, the occultist uses green to individualize and strengthen the nerves, and when he draws his vibration into the body of a patient, he brings in new materials and new atoms, which give new life. For failing eyesight and most eye troubles, green is the proper current to use, since the optic nerves are revitalized and individualized by its strengthening vibrations. The occultists also use this current as an antidote for altruism. There comes a time in the career of every man in some life when he feels that he must be an Atlas and go about carrying the world on his back. He wants to bear everybody's sorrows and thinks it a great privilege to give away everything he has in the world. He becomes a devout believer in poverty and piety, and sometimes goes so far as to study the pictures of Jesus of Nazareth and of the martyrs, and trims his beard to look like theirs, that he may look the life of sacrifice he tries to live. He dissipates himself mentally, physically, and financially, and sooner or later nervous prostration, if not starvation, claims his body, and he goes out upon the next plane of consciousness. For such a person, the occultist uses the green current to restore him to normal condition of individualization. The occultist is taught never to give more of anything than his surplus, and never to assume the burdens of another. for by so doing he would be robbing that other of the experience he came into this world to get. In every walk of life we see people who have assumed burdens that do not belong to them, and who are crying aloud to deity for help, and are demanding to know why such burden should be laid upon their shoulders. God never laid upon any of his children anything that was greater than they could bear, and when we find our accumulations of sorrow and care becoming too great to endure, it is time to examine the bundle and see if we have not taken something that does not belong to us, for a mistaken sense of duty often leads us into great difficulties, as real duty does. The color blue represents all the higher mental qualities. In the subcurrents are literature, music, art, the higher education, organization, order, form, harmony, etc. This force can never be used by animals, but only by the subjective mind of man. All inspiration along any line of thought is due to the inflow of this blue current, of which men are many times entirely unconscious. Artists in any line express greater things than are in their own minds to express. We often hear it said of another, "He taught better than he knew." This kind of work has been called inspirational, but the real source of inspiration has never been understood or explained. One man believed the soul of his departed wife inspired him to write the burning lines of verse that made him famous. Another thinks an old master stood behind him while he knelt and in the deepest reverence painted his best picture. The musician's soul thrills with the melody that he alone can hear, and he tells you in a whisper that angels came while he sat alone and played such symphonies as were never heard on earth before, and that in his poor stumbling way he had tried to reproduce them on his instrument. And none of these knew he had been unconsciously connected through concentration with the blue cosmic current, and had received from it a few of the gems that are stored therein. Suppose you desire to be a musician. The indigo blue subcurrent is the one you should connect yourself with. All great composers have taken their inspiration from this current, and it was according to each one's capacity to draw into himself this force, and listen to the music of the spheres that made him the musician that he was. The musical currents run from the deep indigo blue to the sky blue, but no one known to the world has yet been able to reach the highest subcurrent, and to bring from it the music that lies there. The soul is yet to come, and will be the gift of the 20th century to the world. But each and every one can draw inspiration himself that will enable him to understand, to interpret, to execute, and to compose music according to his own development. The subcurrent for literature is a light blue, the blue we see in the autumn sky. Anyone can write, if he will be persistent enough to be a good grammarian, master the technicalities of rhetoric, and learn to tap the universal current in which the gems of this art are stored. In each human soul lies latent the ability to learn every art and science which is known, and by aid of these great currents and subcurrents to become perfect in his knowledge of all. The occultist uses the blue current also for restoring harmony and health to persons who are beginning to have a tinge of blue beyond the green. Persons who vibrate between the blue and green are passing in their development from where the objective mind no longer has entire dominion over the subjective, but shares with it the honors of controlling the body and its mundane affairs. Yellow is the highest color vibration upon this planet, and is therefore the greatest force. It is spiritual and creative love. It is wisdom, intuition, divine harmony, and is the highest aspect of deity that we are capable of understanding at this time. It embraces all the spiritual qualities we can conceive, and I regret to say that man does not possess very many of them as yet. To acquire this force, man must develop to the point where the subjective mind controls the objective, and when he can attach himself to the yellow cosmic current, he can accomplish anything he may undertake to do upon this planet. An undeveloped person cannot use the yellow current or force because it is a vibration so much higher than his own that there is sympathy between him and it, and it can be used to help only such persons as are in sympathy with it. In using the cosmic currents for healing, the occultist takes the left hand of the patient in his right hand, and after drawing it into himself, the current he desires to use, he passes it out through his right hand into the left side of his patient. The left side, being the receptive side, the patient receives the force without difficulty, and it passes down his left side and up the right and around and over and through his body until every nerve and fiber of his body is soothed and relaxed by this wonderful divine force. A knowledge of these forces and how to use them gives one almost unlimited power, For where the human will alone, and unaided, is unable to accomplish its purpose, it can, by putting into operation these universal forces, have omnipotence working with it, making an assured success of its every undertaking.